I want to start today by saying a few thank yous. Part of our mission here at Broadway is to serve Christ for the transformation of our community and our world. And as a pastor, it's always such a joy for me to get to watch you all do that in lots and lots of different ways. I mean, I get to watch you all do that in your everyday jobs, right? Like as teachers and as counselors and as accountants, as all the things, you're having an impact in that way. And then in addition to your jobs, you go above and beyond to reach out to our community in meaningful ways. And so like yesterday, for example, yesterday morning was Saturday morning meals, and Bethany is our leader. She coordinates all of us and gets us there. How many people do we serve on a typical Saturday when we're a part of that? Over 200 meals get delivered to our community. Some of you go out in advance and you pick up bread from Panera, or you come earlier in the morning and you help cook the food. Some of you help package the food, and then others of you show up and you actually deliver that food to people in our community who otherwise might go from Friday to Sunday without having a warm meal. And so what you do matters. At the same time, just down the street from where we do Saturday meals, Pride Fest was happening, and our friend Mary Lee headed that up. She coordinated our table, and a bunch of you were there and present to say hello and offer a smile to people in our community, to help people know that when we say everyone's welcome, no exceptions, it's not just a cute tagline we like to put on t-shirts. We mean that. You are welcome here. And so thank you all who showed up and were the presence of Christ there to greet people with his love. I could just keep going. Today, many of you are going to show up across town, and you're not going to have a trunk, but you're going to have a table, and you're going to give all those cute little kids lots of candy and sugar them up and send them home with their parents. So thank you in advance for doing that. We appreciate it. But what we're able to do together is just so beautiful, and I'm so grateful that I get to be a part of it. I wanted to tell you all that the other day, I did something. I said something, actually, that I swore I never would. Confession time. That's right. I was like, I don't like this. I'm never going to say this. But, it kind of happened. Even though, I know that when someone says this to me, that it frustrates me to no end, right? So this is what happened. My younger son, Sam, he kept asking to do the same thing over and over and over again. And I had said no. And when I reached the umpteenth time, he finally looked at me and asked that question, why? And that's when it happened. That's when I said the thing that I said I would never say. And I bet you know what it is. Because I said so, right? Because I said so. Why do we say that? What's behind that? Why does that pop out of our mouths? If we get honest about it, what is behind that, or at least it was for me, it's I didn't want to have that conversation, right? I didn't want to have to explain myself. And so I tried to use my authority as his mother to force him into compliance. And you can ask me how that went. Not well, thank you, okay? Because he just asked again. But I share that with you because I feel like we sometimes do this in the church when it comes to sin, right? We'll talk about attitudes or actions, and we'll say, no, to this, that, or the other. And then we'll say, because we said so. Or, actually, a lot of times it's because God said so, right? We evoke his authority to say, you can't do this because this is the authority, and the conversation is over, which has caused a little bit of frustration amongst people in the church. It's often been this one-sided monologue. Just don't do X, Y, or Z because God said so. Get it, got it, good, let's move on. However, in this sermon series, we're trying to reopen this conversation. We're trying to take some time to consider that question, why? To wrestle with why there are some attitudes and actions that it would be best for us to avoid in our lives. And then even better, the more fruitful part of this conversation, I think, is for us to consider together, how can we, instead of those attitudes and actions, embrace something that is better, something that is more life-giving in our lives. And so we've been walking through what we're calling the 7 heavenly virtues, which are the antidotes to something we're probably more familiar with, something we probably heard a lot more about. And if you remember the sound we made last week, you can make it after I say it. But the 7 deadly sins. Dun, 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 right? Yeah, the 7 deadly sins. We've heard lots of lists of all the no-nos, right? All the things that we shouldn't do. But throughout the series, what we're hoping to do is to also tease out these practices that can help us actually hit the target of the full and abundant life that God so wants for us. And so today, we turn our attention to our next virtue, which is temperance, which is the antidote for gluttony, okay? Gluttony. Now, to be honest with you all, there is not a lot in Scripture about gluttony. There is definitely not a whole lot of like really digging in and giving us a great definition of what gluttony is. If you open up your Bible, you would find like there's places like in Philippians 3 where Paul mentions people's stomachs being their God. And then in Romans 16, where he talks about people being ruled by their appetites. You can go to the Proverbs and you'll find sprinkled throughout the Proverbs these warnings not to hang out with drunkards and gluttons, which, by the way, Jesus was accused of being and doing in his life, right? And so some theologians, they've looked at gluttony on this list of the 7 deadly sins, and they've been like, how did it even get here? Like, why is it on the list? And then some of them are even more surprised that when the very first list came out, guess what was at the very top of the list? The first thing there, gluttony was. But again, like, it's hard for us to get a clear definition from Scripture, and so we're gonna wrestle with this a little bit together. I don't know about you, but when I hear the word gluttony, what I see is a huge banquet table packed full of food, kind of like when we have potlucks around here, right? Like, we love to eat here at the Greenwood campus. In fact, most of the pictures that I have feature us with some kind of food or drink in our hand, partly because we have people like Miss Lee, who shows up with homemade treats. She came in the door today. I think you might have missed it if you didn't get her early enough. She came in today with, what was it, banana bread? She had like 3 loaves of banana bread. We're like, thank you for helping illustrate our point today, Miss Lee. I think that is her banana pudding, and I did tell her, like, we need more of that stat. So if you see her and you want to encourage her to bring back the banana pudding, that'd be great. We also have, like, these cookies from our friend Marilee Forrest, which I am convinced are, best cookies in the universe. One day, for a potluck, Marilee, she's hiding. Marilee, she decided everybody's got to be tired of these, world famous cookies. So I'm going to make something different. And she brought, what was it, oatmeal raisin? Cowboy cookies. And the children were very upset. And let's be honest, so were the adults. I'm pretty sure I saw Evan Harris like, what is this out there? We like our cookies around here, all right? So food is something that brings us together. Like I said, lots of pictures of us enjoying food. It is a source of joy. It's a source of connection, right? If you read through the Bible in the Old Testament, God literally commands his people to feast together several times throughout the year. And then on Jesus' last night with us, what's he do? He sits down at a meal with his friends, and he tells us to eat this meal together, the Lord's Supper, which we're going to enjoy later today. And so my question is, like, when do we cross the line, right, from enjoying food into becoming gluttons? When do we cross the line into something harmful? And is food always the culprit? Across the history of the church, art that depicts this sin, it does tend to focus on food. I have some pictures for you from the Middle Ages, like this one. I mean, I think you get the point. You can see the food, you can see the drink happening in this picture. Or this one, where maybe he's had a few too many, we don't know. Looks like he's really enjoyed it, whatever it is. And then this one where the excess is just clearly apparent, lots and lots of food here. Or this one, in which we get a few bonuses. Like in this picture, you get the introduction of a pig down here, on the left-hand side, an animal that is often linked to overindulgence. And then just in case we weren't sure that this was bad and we should avoid this, they've got this like demon-like figure up here at the top. Point made, right? But today, I want to challenge us to broaden the definition of gluttony a little bit, okay? It's a harmful habit that can and often does involve food. But sometimes we can substitute something else in food's place. So here's a definition I want us to think about together. Gluttony is grasping for fulfillment through continuous external experiences to avoid inner unhappiness. So again, one more time. Gluttony is grasping for fulfillment through continuous external experiences to avoid inner unhappiness. So let's unpack this. From time to time, all of us have a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Yeah? Anybody had one of those? I've had a few. The kind like where maybe your computer crashes and you lose like all the work you've been doing on a big project. Or maybe you go and you get the mail and you get a bill and it's like way larger than you expected it to be. Or your car breaks down on the side of the interstate. Just last Sunday, Miss MJ, who's downstairs with our kids, who's terrific, right? She was excited to come here to teach, to play. She takes off down Cumberland Trace, where she lives. And part of the way down the street, she realizes, oh no, I have left my purse on top of my car. Yeah. Who's ever put something on top of their car and forgotten about it? Yeah, it happens. Mom, I remember vividly Dad doing that with his Bible quite often and like looking back and just seeing it going down the road. So her purse had flown off and she stopped. And, it wasn't enough that she'd lost her purse, but it was like raining. Do y'all remember this last week? It was raining outside. And so she's out, she's looking, she finds her wallet pretty quickly, which is a good news, right? But then the whole rest of her purse, the purse itself and everything else in it is not there. Her phone, her checkbook, all her other necessities. So she looks and she looks and she looks. And eventually some guy did find her purse. Her checkbook had her address on there, so he brings it to her. But of course, not before she has thoroughly panicked and is completely soaked. So if you saw her last week and she looked like a little deer in the headlights, she'd been a bit overwhelmed. She had had a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day before she ever got here. And again, I think we all know what that's like. The kind of day that leaves you kind of wondering, am I more mad or sad about all that has happened? And so here's my question. On that terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, when you get home, what is the food that you are reaching out for comfort?
Cake.
Okay. Cake? What kind of cake? Is there a particular kind of cake?
Yellow cake with rainbow chip icing.
Yellow cake with rainbow chip icing. Hypothetically. Do you have one at your home now? That'll help us know how your week's gone. Okay, all right, it's been that kind of week. Not cooked yet. Okay. Somebody else, what are you reaching for? Fried chicken. That's what Jeremy said. He said KFC chicken in particular. Yeah, comfort food, fried chicken, definitely. Yes. Spaghetti. I love spaghetti. That's one of the comfort foods in my home is spaghetti. Somebody else? Mac and cheese. So much cheese, so much goodness. Anybody else? Cookout. Listen, you like cookout? My son has recently discovered the wonder of cookout, where you can get your burger and 2 sizable sides, right? Yeah, he's all about it. And an extra quesadilla. So, right? How much is it now? I don't know. $8? That's still pretty good. Yeah, I mean, you go, you get a burger, a quesadilla, cheese sticks, whatever. I mean, it is pretty amazing. Every teenage boy's dream, for sure. Somebody else? Pizza. Yeah. Mine is cookie dough right out of the fridge, salmonella poisoning. My dad was always worried about that. But 43, I wish. 43 years and I'm still here. Oh, man. I feel more like 64, so that's the funny part. Yeah, cookie dough. Although, I'll tell you all, sometimes we're not, super self-aware, right? That can happen. So I said cookie dough. I wrote it into my sermon. I talked about it at the last service. But when your friends bring you a sweatshirt like this, it might tell you have a different problem. They brought this to me a few seconds ago. It's like, I need a Coke Zero. It's true. That is something I reach for. And in fact, I asked MJ what she reached for at the end of her terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, and that's what she said as well. She didn't just say a Coke Zero, she said a very large Coke Zero, right? But we all do this, right? We turn to comfort food in times of distress, in times of difficulty, and honestly, it is not a bad short-term strategy, okay? Whenever we reach for that comfort food, it does reduce our stress. It does help us feel less lonely. It gives us a sense of security as we cling to that Coke Zero in one hand and what do you even call that, tube of cookie dough in the other? I don't know. But it's just that, right? It's only a short-term strategy. And that's where the problem starts to come in. It's when we keep turning to food as a distraction. As we keep turning to food as an escape from ever really dealing with the thing that's making us feel unsettled, that's making us feel dissatisfied in the first place. However, if you think about it, it's not just food that we can use to do that, right? Food is not our only distraction. Sometimes we distract ourselves by binging TV or endlessly scrolling on Instagram or online shopping or constantly surrounding ourselves with other people or going to the other extreme and isolating ourselves from everyone else. Excess comes in lots of different forms. Back to our definition, gluttony is grasping for fulfillment through continual external experiences to avoid inner unhappiness. And those external experiences can look different for each of us. It's not one size fits all. We all have things we reach out to for that momentary comfort that, if we're not careful, can become habitual, right? That can become continual, that we can reach out to again and again and again. However, here's the issue with that, right? As much as I wish that I could get my Sonic large Coke Zero and my container of cookie dough and binge watch an entire season of Law and Order SVU, and that solve all my problems, it doesn't, right? It only just delays them and gives me a tummy ache in the process, right? And in fact, it kind of leads us to what is a good definition of sin for us to consider, which is doing that which simply doesn't work, right? Behaviors that defeat us again and again. Now, I don't want you to worry. I'm not going to ask you to call out to me or turn and talk to a neighbor, but I do want to create some space for you to just get a bit curious today, to reflect a little bit, to get honest with yourself and with God. When you are feeling unsatisfied, what are those external experiences that you find yourself reaching out to again and again to try to satisfy your starving soul? What are those things for you? Can you see them? Can you name them? And if so, consider how is that working for you? Really, Is it helping solve what you're actually struggling with? There's no shame here. We all have or we all will fall into gluttony at some point or another. But the question we really want to consider today is what is the alternative? What is it that we can reach out to whenever we are feeling unsatisfied, when we are feeling unsettled? Well, instead of reaching out for that distraction, what is the virtue that can help us move toward true and lasting and deep happiness and satisfaction with God? Well, in the tradition of the church, the virtue that helps us to do this is called temperance. How many of you have used that in this sentence in this past week? Never? Okay, yeah, me neither. But I think we're smart people. We can figure out what temperance means together, right? If we temper something, what are we doing? we're counterbalancing it, right? We're keeping it from going from one extreme or another extreme. We're keeping things neutral and moderate. And that's what temperance is about. One definition of temperance is the virtue of right measure. The virtue of right measure. And I like this because I think we could call it like the Goldilocks virtue. You know, like God has given us lots of good gifts. And his intention is for us to enjoy those good gifts. But what temperance is about us enjoying those good gifts, not too little and not too much, but just right. Just right. And what that means is that it's not about us saying, well, I'm just not ever going to eat another Oreo again, or I'm done with TV and social media. I mean, like that could. I mean, I'm not saying that's not a possibility, but that's not what temperance always means, right? It's really about us discerning with God what is healthy for me, what is helpful for my life, and that doesn't make it a rule for everyone else. And so what temperance requires is like as we wrestle with God about what is good, what is healthy for us, what is the right measure, then that takes some self-control, right? And the Proverbs, they give us a helpful picture of why self-control matters. This is Proverbs 25, verse 28. It says, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. Of course, we don't live in a city that's surrounded by a wall, do we? And so this might not resonate with us right away. So I want you to hear the Message paraphrase of this. It says, a person without self-control is like a house with its doors and windows knocked out. And you know, when we hear that, I think it's easy, or at least for me, growing up in the church, to sometimes hear that self-control is all about kind of like image management. You know, it's all about us not doing certain things so that we can look good and virtuous, so that we can be considered a good Christian. But that is not what self-control is about. Self-control is not about doing this like performance to have the approval of other people, right? It's not about us being like, well, we don't want to be the person with the broken down walls. We don't want to have knocked out windows and doors. That's not what we're talking about here. Rather, it's all about our own safety and our own protection so that we can truly flourish. You know, going back to the city with a wall around it, in that day and time, your city needed to have a wall. Why? To keep your enemies out, right? To keep out things that could harm you. If that wall came down, then that meant armies could march right in and could wreak havoc. And they could also carry out anything that they wanted, things that were good, things that were precious and important to the city. And if you think about it in our homes, that's why we have doors and windows too, right? Like, to protect, to keep in what needs to be kept in and to keep out what needs to stay out. The last home that Jeremy and I lived in, before the one we live in now, we had like eaves, you know, and they had just enough of an opening for a guest to get in. And that guest was squirrels, right? Like there's nothing like sitting on your couch and like hearing all around in the attic, right? And of course, like the squirrels got in and they chewed stuff up. They made a mess. And so we eventually had to call in someone, and they put up wire like over the eave, you know, so that the squirrels could no longer get in. But there's a reason why it was open, right? Like to let in air and light. And that's what temperance is about. It's about protection so that we can flourish. But remember, like the goal of a wall around a city is like it also had an opening to let in the good things, right? To let in people, to let in what was needed. And the same thing with our doors and our windows. Like we want to be able to open those so that we can welcome in what is good as well. Pope Francis, he addressed this. He said, it's not true that temperance makes one gray and joyless. On the contrary, it increases the joy that flourishes in the heart of those who recognize and value what counts most in life. Temperance is the virtue of right measure. So how can we get practical about this? How can we embrace this virtue that helps us combat gluttony, that helps us combat seeking fulfillment through all these external things and to avoid our inner unhappiness. Here's what I want you to do. This week, when you find yourself wanting to reach out to that thing you thought about earlier, the thing that the action you take to try to avoid the unhappiness that you're feeling inside, when you sense yourself doing that thing, to stop for a moment, be that turning on the TV or eating a whole package of Oreos or picking up your phone. Instead of doing that, I want you to do a little home inspection, okay? Who here has ever bought or sold a house? Lots of us, right? And part of that process is the home inspection, which, is always a big reality check, right? Like if you're a seller, you're like, no whammies, no whammies, no whammies. You don't want anything to come back on that report. And even if you're the buyer, you're like, I hope that, like, the foundation's not bad or whatever. You like anxiously await that report. But that report's important, right? Like whenever you do a home inspection, what it does is it points out what needs attention, what needs to be attended to, right? And so this week, instead of grabbing that thing, instead of reaching for that external experience, what I want you to stop and do is to take some time in God's presence to do a little home inspection and see, like, where's the window broken? Like, where is it that I'm actually feeling vulnerable? And then name it, right? Get clear about what it is. And then you can show it the attention that it needs. You and God, you can partner toward moving toward that true and lasting fullness that you actually need instead of just distracting yourself from it. A couple weeks ago, I came home from vacation. I wasn't all the way home. I was part of the way home, and I opened up my email. Never do that on vacation, right? I opened up my email, and I had this email that wasn't mean, it wasn't bad, but it just like triggered something in me. Like I read it, and I had forgotten something. And like, for whatever reason, like it kind of set me off that I had forgotten this thing. And in my mind, it was just like, like you messed up, you're bad, like all these messages we can tell ourselves. And so my gravitational pull towards excess was toward isolation, right? Like I didn't want to be around anyone because it's like, what if I mess up again? So like my gluttony was to like try to be by myself, but I couldn't be by myself because I was with people on this trip, right? And so Jeremy noticed it. He's attentive. He's been stuck with me all these many years. And so we're sitting on the plane, and I'm like a little edgy. I'm a little sharp. And he said something that I would not necessarily tell you to say to your partner, but he looked at me but I needed this reality check. He looked at me and he said, "You're being mean today." and I knew that I was, and it was like my way of like pushing people away, right? And so eventually though, like I had to do a little home inspection. It's like, why in the world is this silly little email bothering me so much and causing me to show this excess, like to totally try to isolate myself? And when I did, like what I noticed is like the window that was broken in my life is like, I stand up here and tell you all the time how much God loves you, how completely and fully he loves you, and how there's nothing you can do that could ever change that. And I know that in my head, right? I know that. And a lot of times I know it in my heart, but there are just these moments where it's just like, is that really true? Like, if I mess this up, does that make me unlovable? Does God really love me if I'm not perfect? And so, like, as I started to recognize that, the answer was not to isolate at all. It was to do the opposite, right? Like, the answer was to actually move toward relationship, which looked like me, first of all, coming before God and being like, God, I know you do love me, and like letting God love me in that moment. And as soon as I started doing that, like remembering like who I am to God and where my value and worth are found, then it was just like, oh, like I can re-engage again. Like, oh, I can take care of that thing that I have forgotten about. I can make that right. And I can be nice to my husband and not push him away anymore. It took me like a day and a half to even tell him what was going on, because it just like, it struck a nerve in me. But, that was a process I had to go through, that little home inspection. Like, what is really going on here? And it could have persisted if I would have refused to do that because I'm stubborn. But that's the thing about temperance. It's not like this hard and fast list of rules. Like, do this, don't do this. You can have this much. But it's really not about rules at all. It's about relationship with God, right? It's about turning to him in those times when we're feeling dissatisfied and partnering with him, listening to him, discerning with him. Like, what do I really need in this moment? And so as you do this little home inspection this week, it could be that you talk to God and you just decide, you know what, like, I'm just not going to keep Oreos in the house for a while. And I'm going to do this hard thing. Or it could be that you decide, all right, God, I'm going to eat a handful of these Oreos, and then we're going to go have that hard conversation that I've been needing to have, right? Like, it can be both. It could be that, like, you get curious and you're like, oh, I've overcommitted myself. I've said yes to things because I'm just trying to be nice and I've overdone it. And so I'm gonna tell that person, like, actually, I can't do that. And then I'm going to go and watch that show. Or it might be that you connect with a friend who can remind you who you are while you drink that large Sonic Diet Coke or Coke Zero, whatever it might be. But again, temperance is the virtue of right measure. And right measure for me is not going to be the right measure for you. It is something that's going to take some discernment. It's going to take some investment in your relationship with God. And so I want to challenge you this week to take some time to do that home inspection and to know that when you're doing this, you're not doing this with an angry God who's waiting to see all the ways that you messed up, but rather a God who left the glory of heaven to come and to walk right here beside us, to show us the way to true fullness.